Howdy, all! It's Friday, and in Buffalo, I have to bring up this weather update. Schizophrenic Buffalo weather, Peter. Yesterday, it was last week when Russ was here. Maybe this has something to do with it. It was -4 Fahrenheit. Yesterday, it was 61.
Yeah, it's 62 today here.
Yeah, and it rained torrential downpour last night, which basically melted all the snow. And as I'm driving for coffee this morning, there's flashing on the highway, winter storm warning, 1 p.m. Friday to 1 p.m. Saturday. So we're going to get a fresh new blanket of snow just to replace the old crappy snow.
Cry me a river. It's -30 here right now before the wind chill.
Wow.
-30 Celsius.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Put on another sweater, man.
All right, Russ. You had some NFL stuff.
All right, so let's preview the Saturday games for the NFL because it's Friday. We'll do the Saturday ones. I don't care as much about the Sunday ones. The Steelers-Jaguars one is an interesting one because, like last week, I watched some of the Jaguars game, and they do have a great defense, but Blake Bortles can't throw the ball. Like, he literally ran for like 80-something yards, and if he didn't do that, they'd have lost.
Yeah.
So even though the Steelers are giving quotes like they're looking ahead to New England, I get why they're doing it because Blake Bortles, you're going to let him beat you throwing, and he won't do it. He's just not a great quarterback.
At a certain point during that game, and remember, Tyrod Taylor, I'm not a big fan of Tyrod Taylor because he can't throw the ball 15 yards, and all he does is run, and he is choked by indecision. At one point during the game, I said Tyrod Taylor was Aaron Rodgers compared to Blake Bortles. That's how bad Bortles was, and then he started to run, and there you go. But Jacksonville,
he can't throw the ball.
No, he can't throw. But Jacksonville has beaten Pittsburgh. I think they beat him both times.
I know.
So, I mean, you can say that the regular season is meaningless, and usually that's the case, especially when it comes to the Ottawa Senators beating Toronto. But they
have a good receiving core. That Juju Schuster is somebody I wrote about a couple weeks ago. He's come on lately. I think the Steelers will win this one. It might be close. Now, here's the fun one. Okay, so now the Eagles-Atlanta game. Okay. Now, I've never heard a fan base – and I'm not going to include Anthony in this, just so you know, Anthony's not included in this. But I've never heard a fan base just cry about how they're the underdog, how they're a 3-point underdog. But I don't think these people understand how the NFL works.
Yeah.
This is basically Nick Foles against Matt Ryan. Yeah. And at the end of the day, Ryan made it to the Super Bowl last year and had a lead on the Patriots at halftime. That's what they're going for. They're going by the strength of that. And what's interesting to me is, and Peter, you could chime in on this, the biggest thing that Eagles fans seem to be holding their hat on is, hey, it'll be a 30-degree day when the game starts, and they're used to playing in a dome. And I'm like, this is the 21st century. I don't think players are bothered by weather anymore.
Oh, no, they are. They are. They're totally bothered, and it matters. And you know what?
I see guys throwing no matter what the weather is.
Now, tell me about the Miami Dolphins playing in Buffalo, and I'll tell you about players that are affected by weather.
There are some teams that just –
this isn't -15 degrees. This is 30 degrees and some rain.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Well, I'm going to tell you.
I mean, I think it doesn't – like at 30 degrees, it doesn't matter as much as -15 or whatever.
That's what
or 0, right? But it has an effect. The wind kicks up, a little bit of rain, it makes a mess of things. Just be thankful that you don't have Walsh as a kicker on either of those teams.
Here's to me the big factor. Big factor is Atlanta's got the best quarterback and the best receiver in Julio Jones. That's a plus for them. Eagles might have a better defense, but as we've noticed the last couple of years, defense doesn't win Super Bowls anymore.
Yeah, it's surprising, and not that I'm into the betting lines, but it was stark when I heard somebody saying that I believe the Eagles are the first #1 seed to be an underdog.
Yeah,
and that's
because of Nick Foles, because he's looked horrible in all but one of his starts, and that one really, that game I think they got kind of bailed out on a penalty. Otherwise, that wouldn't have even turned out well. He's not good.
But let's just say this. The only thing that the Atlanta Falcons have proved they can do in big spots is choke.
But
so,
they've gotten to the Super Bowl. This Eagles team,
I know they've gotten to the Super Bowl and they choked it away.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. But I mean, that's the same as saying the Buffalo Bills. But the Buffalo Bills made it to the Super Bowl all those years, so they knew how to make it.
They choked against the Giants.
No, I know that. But I'm saying this is the experienced team. I'm going with the experienced team.
I get that.
And here's the other thing. So I don't know if you guys follow Doug Peterson at all or not as a coach, but he clearly is a throwing coach. He's like Andy Reid in that way. Now, every week he says, we're going to run more. And then every week when his back's against the wall, they throw more. It doesn't matter if it's Nick Foles or it's Carson Wentz. It's what he defaults to. And
it's a shell game, Russ. He's hoping that he convinces the other team that he's going to run. It's like somebody saying, okay, well, the Buffalo Sabres are going to try to play an up-tempo Vegas Golden Knights type of performance, but they don't have the players that the Golden Knights do. So, all right, let's
just say at the end of the day, they're counting on Jay Ajayi running for all these yards. Jay Ajayi has bad knees, and I've seen this guy fumble. So I don't know if he's the guy that you're really counting on. So I think Atlanta will win this game. I think that's why they are the favorite, and I think fans are going to just be upset and let them be upset.
Question is, will there be snow for them to throw snowballs with batteries in them?
No, there won't be snow. There won't be anything like that.
Will Santa Claus be there to be booed?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. It'll just be Matt Ryan being the better quarterback. And Matt Ryan's local to this area. He's from like Westchester, PA. Yeah. And so it will be that guy returning to where he grew up to beat the Eagles in the playoffs. And yes, they'll be the first team since the merger to probably lose home field and not be favored. Who cares?
Unless I'm bored out of my mind, I won't be watching any of it.
Hello, Hockey. I'm going to be laying on the couch. What am I going to do?
Sorry about that. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, January 12th, 2018.
I'm Peter Kessier from very cold Winnipeg today.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, where it's 63, but it's really rainy, so it doesn't matter.
And I'm Michael Agello, and we're preparing for the apocalypse here in Buffalo, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Russ, the press conference today for the ownership switch over from Peter Karmanos to Thomas Dundon was held in Raleigh today. I know Bettman was there. I didn't get a chance to really listen to it. I was getting ready for the show, but it does sound like that there is no chance that a team that a lot of people thought was penciled in for a potential move someplace else is going to move anytime soon.
Right. Now this definitely solidifies them. I know Gary Bettman was getting mad because he felt like the information was unfounded, or maybe some of the teams that wanted a team were looking at it. But if you did, and Peter would look at it, if you did look at the financials and saw that Karmanos couldn't come up with a deal, it didn't look good. But what we found out today is that Dundon's first deal got turned down by Karmanos. And then he was all bummed out because he wanted the whole team, and Karmanos wouldn't sell the whole team. So I get that. So then there was this sort of, back and forth that went on, and now he's got 61%. Mm-hmm. The positives that you could pull out of this, if you're a Hurricanes fan, is you've got Ron Francis, you've got a lot of good young players, and you've got the shell, and really the organization is deep with prospects of just the right things. Your debt now is much lower. You've got a young, energetic guy in charge, and that's the biggest thing. When you see Peter Karmanos, who's 75 up on the panel, and Tom Dundon, who I don't know how old he is, but he's probably 50, there's a big difference in the energy level.
Sure. And
so this guy is going to bring instant energy, and this guy is now a hockey fan, and he said, yeah, I'll probably make irrational decisions. Like, even though he's a rich guy, he's a very relatable guy for the area. So I think he'll draw people, kind of like Pat Croce did with the Sixers here years ago. I think he's got that kind of personality. So those things are big positives.
Yeah. And Peter, the only thing I can draw as a comparison is the reaction in Buffalo when Terry Pegula bought the team from Tom Golisano. Remember that basically the Sabres were on rent control and welfare for years. They went bankrupt. Golisano picked them up for pennies on the dollar. He had a strict budget. Darcy Regier and Lindy Ruff had to operate under that budget for years. And when Golisano finally sold the team to Pagula, who is big billions in oil and gas, he came in and right away it was like, okay, let's spend some money. And they traded for Brad Boyes at that time was a decent second line scorer. And then they went out in free agency and spent stupid money on Christian Ehrhoff and Ville Laino in a market where there wasn't great free
agent. The Ville Laino contract was awful.
Yeah. Right. Then it wasn't great free
agent. Ehrhoff's was buyout proof, or right. It wasn't buyout proof. It was just nasty.
But Darcy was drunk with money, and he said, "Okay, I can go out and spend because I got backing from the ownership." And it turned out not to be the good move. Now I don't know anything about Thomas Dundon and what he's going to do in Carolina, but Russ is right. This team is they're right now in the second wild card spot. I think they're a scorer or two away from being. I don't know if they will threaten Tampa Bay, but I think they can make the playoffs.
I think they could. I think
if they could put a scare at a few people. So
if things broke right. I mean, I'll give you a couple of things. Like Dundon said, he's not necessarily spending more money. And Francis said, I'm operating the same way I used to. Now that they also said, hey, if the right guy comes along, even if the revenues aren't where we want them to be yet, we probably will spend the money. But he's not going to just spend it to spend it. And I think that's smart. Yeah. Because they're in that mode right now where that team is that, they could be just like Buffalo and you put two bad contracts in there and then all of a sudden they're hamstrung for a couple of years.
Just because the ownership changed doesn't mean the realities of the economics of the situation's done. It just means you're farming out the back end responsibility of ownership. Right, what this reminds me of a lot of, and it's something that people forget about this, but the Vancouver Canucks had a financial boondoggle in the 90s. And eventually what happened was once they started having to pay out these contracts, first Kirk McLean got one, then Trevor Linden, then they had to do Pavel Bure at $5 million a year. All of a sudden, Arthur Griffiths and his family realized we don't make enough money elsewhere to go into where this is going. At that point, we already knew the Jets were leaving Winnipeg because Barry Shankarou realized I can't afford this. And he brought in John McCaw, cell phone billionaire from Seattle. And McCaw was a very silent owner. This is a different scenario in ownership, but you're talking about, Russ, but it provided the franchise with some energy and some stability. And it's and it's nice to hear Francis say he's not going to operate the same way because then the Canucks, after being close in 94, went out and did some dumb things.
Right.
And we all know what they are. One started with a 36-year-old Mark Messier.
Yeah.
The other started with that trade to get Alexander McGillney, and then it unraveled because you got a false sense of security because your back end, your financial end of ownership is solved, and maybe they're enabling things. It's a shiny new toy. You got some money, but the Canucks also had to sell a certain number of season tickets in 1997 to meet the Canadian assistance plan. Like it wasn't always a great story there, and it's great to hear that Carolina is sitting there going, okay, we've solved this ownership issue, but how we operate our business doesn't change. And that's hopefully the best way for them to go.
Right.
And hopefully
they're trying to increase
Hedman and the Board of Governors is giving them some guidance on that. Don't be sailing.
Yeah, they're trying to expand their season ticket base. The interesting thing that Carmano said, which I do think is fair, is that they made it to the Stanley Cup the year after they didn't make the playoffs. And in 2009, they make it to the conference finals. The year after, they don't make the playoffs. They weren't constantly in it. So then it did take fans in and out of it. And it was harder to sell tickets that way rather than, hey, if you're good for 10 years, there's always that optimism. So I do think that was like sort of like a weird thing that happened with them. And that's why I think, Ron Francis has built stability into this franchise.
Well, if you look at the Hurricanes team that won the Stanley Cup, it was a team of mercenaries. It was Rob Brind'Amour and a lot of older players. I mean, they had the young Eric Stahl and the young Cam Ward, but it was basically
was young, but they mainly were old.
Right, exactly. So and that was not something that could last. It was not something they could keep together for years. This is a team where they have a lot of young players. They have a lot of young talent. I think that we've questioned the Scott Darling signing, but right now he's starting to pick it up a little bit. Ward has played better.
They don't have one outrageous contract though. That's the one thing in favor.
No, they don't. But I also think
there's no Alexander Semin contract.
Yeah, I also think though that they are loaded in one position that would enable them to be able to make deals without going out and spending money like Francis is saying they're not going to. They're loaded on defense. They have the deep depth on defense. And I think they're like I said, one or two scores from being a threat in the Eastern Conference. That it may cost them a Noah Hannafin. It may cost them a Jake Bean or somebody like that, but they have the ability to go out and get those players. And I think maybe with new ownership, they'll have a little more confidence to be able to do that. So that's where I think they're going.
They have enough depth in their blue line group to make, and Mike, we were talking about this sort of earlier today, the DM, to make that proverbial hockey deal.
Yes.
To do it, the cliche thing, to benefit their team and someone else. It's just a question of, is the other party going to have the right cap space and conditions to make the deal?
Well, here I'm going to take a page out of the Hurricanes past and tell you they should reapply that. So, and I forget what year, it might have been 2002 when the draft was in Carolina.
Okay.
And they moved up to get Andrew Ladd. And that worked out really well. Right now, if let's say, and we don't know this, but let's say Hannafin isn't going to re-sign, right? And they think they're going to have to trade him.
Or it's going to be a Trouba situation where he holds out.
Yeah.
Right. Either way, maybe I'm going to dangle him at the draft and move up in the draft and try and get either Svechnikov or Zadina or a guy who I believe will be a top-line scorer that we need, that we could get in there in the next 2 years that will really transform this team. And I think as a new owner with energy, you're better off doing that move through the draft than you are in free agency.
No, because then you can retain that guy for 7 years, basically qualify.
And it's also shuffling the deck chairs on where the salary is going too, right? It's buying you a little bit of time on salary. And that's probably a small thing too. But it also allows, and Russ, I really like your point about the new energy. I think that's super important because
I can see it in the press conference,
maybe you don't need the energy with a checkbook to sign people and pay players, but you need it in your marketing. You need it in what you want to present as the vision. And if you're a team that financially market's a bit of a, up and down, as you said, you've been in and out. You've been a team that's been a contender and not. And how do fans need to go? You need to rebrand yourself too in the market with the new ownership as well. And that's far more cost effective if you're doing things right behind the scenes than blowing $40 million on the wrong player.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Move up in this draft, get a key offensive player.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, because look, they may make the playoffs, they may not. But if they don't, this is a great opportunity to get your fans involved.
Great year. And I mean, speaking of that, I mean, we'll obviously, you'll be talking about this as we get closer to it, but this is another year where there could be a lot of really interesting things going on in the draft based on how deep this draft could be.
Right. Yeah. Now let's touch on some of the games and some of the things that happened in the games. There's some, I haven't seen this other than it being reported from Sportsnet's Hockey Central, but in the 5-1 game, Calgary beating Tampa Bay, Victor Hedman had a collision with Hathaway, I believe it was one of the.
I think that's right.
Yeah,
I remember seeing it last.
And
night.
it was an awkward looking knee to. It was not purposeful. It was not like a Brian Marchman type of thing. It was just a collision, and he hit him on the side of the left knee, and it looked a little unnatural. And Nick Kiprios or Doug McLean was reporting that Hedman's out for the year. Now I haven't heard that from anywhere else, so I don't know. I'm assuming if it's that, it's an ACL.
Right.
But this was a freight train that was going towards the Stanley Cup, the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, even I don't even think the Stamkos injury would have derailed it because they've dealt with Stamkos being out for long stretches. But Hedman is maybe the one irreplaceable piece because defense is so tough to replace. Now, Sergachev has had a great rookie year, but now, if
but he's got protected minutes, like they know that he's got some flaws defensively.
Yeah. Now Hedman is a 25 a minute guy. So does this? I mean, I think it slightly derails their chances, but how much does it affect their chances of winning?
Hedman was a Norris candidate. Like, I mean, and you just don't replace that. Like, I mean, he is probably if Hedman played in a Canadian market. Let's put it this way: everyone would be talking about him on every sports broadcast that the team.
Just think about how much they talked about Tyler Myers, and Hedman is head and shoulders better than him.
Yeah.
No slight to Myers. I mean, Myers is a good player.
Yeah. But, I mean, Hedman is the elite of the elite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I will say this. I'm really getting tired of everybody saying, well, Hedman was my Norris. And it's like, nobody is giving John Klingberg any credit. But this guy, if he ends up with 75 points playing defense for Ken Hitchcock, he's going to have to be in the Norris conversation. I know people don't want to.
That's I hadn't thought about that point, Russ.
No, but you know what it is? Here's the thing.
It's true.
I'm on the East Coast. I get it, right? But I watch as many West Coast games as I can. But the point is, people seem to be defaulting back to what John Klingberg was a year or two ago. He's a different player now. The offense is the same, but the defense is a lot better. And I think maybe by the end of the season, they'll start giving him credit. Now, Hedman could still have won the award. There's no question.
Yeah. And
maybe he'll come back. Maybe he won't.
And I have to say, we don't know for sure if this is the diagnosis.
No, we don't.
I've been scanning Twitter in the last 15 minutes, and there has been no confirmation other than this report out of Sportsnet. But they do have their sources. So
they've got assets to make a trade, though. Clearly,
yes. And that's where I was going here, Russ, because the number one UFA rental defenseman is Mike Green. Obviously, right. Mike Green is not a replacement for Victor Hedman, but the names that have been out there. We've talked about Carlson. I don't think it's realistic that Carlson gets traded in season because it would just be too big of a deal that would happen before the deadline. But there's the name of Dion Phaneuf has popped up. I don't think they're going that direction, but there are names out there, possible players who could step in and help fill the gap if Hedman is gone. But I don't know, Peter. I think if Hedman is out for the year, they're going the rental direction.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, because like Tampa's dodged a couple cap situations quite deftly, but they've got a looming one coming again. I mean, because remember, Kucherov's an RFA, and he is going to get a lot of money.
Or a short-term deal for good money, one way or the other.
I mean, whatever it is. So they don't want to take someone on that's a liability, that's too big a liability. And particularly if you think to replace Victor Hedman, you're going to have to go. Where does that put you in if you're actually looking for a true replacement? The cost.
No, I think they'll get Green. I think Green will be the guy.
Yeah.
But that's going to mean more minutes for like Andre Schuster, who again I watched the other night. Yeah. And he's pretty much the answer. He's Tampa's answer to Roman Polak. Like if you want to look for don't put Roman Polak down. Polak's a little bit better, Mike. He's a little better,
and he's about 6 years older. And
I know with this just can't even move out there. It's crazy.
What this means is increased minutes for guys like Cuckoo and Dachin, and I think they'll elevate.
They can handle it. I think those guys can handle it.
I think they'll elevate Sergachev because he's had such a good year. But I do think that, and the reported cost for a guy like Mike Green is a first-round pick. I don't think Tampa Bay, with all their prospects that they have in their organization, would hesitate.
No, I don't think they'd hesitate.
Right. Now, they have other areas that they might have wanted to address, but if Hedman is out for the year, that I think number one on their list automatically becomes a defense.
I'll tell you what, number one for me for that team is at some point I got to put Ryan Callahan in bubble wrap so I know I'd have him for the playoffs because he's still massively important to that team if he could actually stay healthy. He does so many little things. We all used to harp on it when he played with the Rangers, but it's really true, but he just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, and Kucherov is eligible to sign an extension next July 1st. He has another year at $4.7 million. But I'm telling you right now, I think he's getting $10 million. Mm-hmm. Unless he takes the hometown discount and the tax-free situation.
He's Russian. He will not take a discount.
No.
Right. So I think they've got a year and change in Kucherov before he goes someplace else and hits the mother load. Okay, Buffalo beats Columbus 3-1. Linus Ullmark makes 44 saves, stands on his head, and then of course this morning gets sent back to the American Hockey League. Now I don't know whether Buffalo has their 5-day bye.
They probably do.
Yeah, if that's the case, then he'll probably be called back. But Russ, I think, Allmark has been lighting it up in the American Hockey League. He played great last night. I think this, that this little test maybe was to see, okay, let's see if this is for real. And I think if there is someone kicking tires on Robin Leonard, that you could see that move happen pretty soon.
Yeah, Allmark's a competitor. We've talked about him for years. I remember him bitching about, like I said, the Rochester Ice a couple of years ago when he was playing down there because it's an old rink. Mm-hmm. He's a good goalie. Now, he did something last night which normally would make me uneasy watching a goalie. Like literally in the blue paint, he was just sort of swimming in the ocean, but he was making all those saves. Yeah. And if you could make those great saves like that, that's something Leonard can't do. Leonard's a positional goalie. He can't move around like the way that Allmark can. And so maybe Allmark is the better goalie for this team because their defense isn't very good. And so, like, if you have the more athletic goalie, because I think the minute you – and this is what I keep saying. I know Leonard had a bad game last game. The minute you put Leonard – and I think this is very similar to Mike Smith, with a team that has a better defensive system, like if it was the Islanders, even with their guys out, he would look better. And just look – and we could talk about it when we get to it. Mike Smith, looks like a different goalie now. If we'd have told – if we made up a different name for him, we called him like, Tara Tsumoto, and that's the goalie – for Calgary, we'd be like, hey, this guy's really good. But because it's Mike Smith and we know what he used to do in Arizona, we have to remember there's a lot of factors that went into that.
Is he really good because he's better than what was in Calgary before, or is he really good in comparison to the league? Yeah. Right?
Is he really good?
I think it's a couple of those things. Sorry.
Yeah. Or is he really good because he's playing against arguably the best defensive core in the league?
That helps.
Yeah. But, one of the things that's coming out of Calgary, I mean, there's a lot of criticisms in Calgary right now. I think the Flames are slowly starting to turn it around. I think they're going to be an interesting team to watch. But one of the things I saw spoken of was whether or not there's a feeling that Mike Smith's puck playing ability isn't worth what they think, the value they think it is in terms of how it's affecting the team, because it's leading to some mistakes, it's leading to some problems. And, and the other thing too is, I mean, just because you're talking about Calgary, is there is not a love for Travis Hamonic right now in Calgary. He really has not played the same. Yeah. I don't know what it is with Hamonic, but I think at the end of the day, you could still count on him being a good defenseman. So,
I mean, right now his salary is that of a number 4 defenseman, and he's probably playing like that. I think their expectation was that he'd be more than that, but he's making less than $4 million. That's chicken feed now in the NHL for a defenseman.
Yeah, the thing last night was, and I can't remember because I was sort of falling asleep. I've got this allergy thing I'm battling. Whether it was a penalty shot or it was in the shootout, but Smith made an unbelievable save last night. That
penalty had to be a penalty shot.
I think it was a penalty shot. That's what I do think it was, which I didn't think he was capable of making. He really went down low. He gave the shooter nothing to shoot at low. Usually Mike Smith would have done the opposite. So I think just the move to Calgary has given him back his confidence that he was lacking, I think, when Arizona was at their worst.
Well, just going back to Leonard for a second, Peter, I don't know if you saw the Winnipeg game against the Sabres when Leonard played and got pulled in the second period, I believe. But 2 of the goals, I mean, the first goal, it was sort of like he looks to the heavens, and you're never supposed to do that when you're a goaltender. There's clearly a crisis of confidence with Leonard in Buffalo. And then the second one was the puck was a soft shot from the point that went through him like a hot knife through butter. I think
he's partially getting screened, and I don't know who the defenseman was. He turned his back to the shot and went like this, right in front of Leonard. Like, I mean, block it or don't be there.
Yeah. Now, while we're on Buffalo, we would be
actually there was more chatter about Calgary, so I don't know. Here's the last thing. I'll just say one more thing about Calgary, because Randy Workman's saying, hey, the defense doesn't look good. They've got all the pieces there to have a good defense. So I'm not really worried about it. I think you should be worried about it if it's April. I don't think you should worry about it now. But I will tell you what I really saw last night that I do think is a big key that I brought up last year is Mark Jankowski looks really good.
And I'll say one thing just on that note to close it off. If the playoffs started today, Winnipeg would be playing – no, they wouldn't actually. Calgary's in third. Sorry, my mistake. Calgary is one of my top two teams that if you're a top seed in the West, you don't play first round.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, but they're
No way.
they would be playing LA right now in the first round if it ended today. Now, like I say, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you, Peter, regarding the events that happened a couple days ago in Buffalo, because not only did it involve Evander Kane, the patron saint of the city of Buffalo, and it also involved former Jet Zach Bogosian, who I didn't know until it was reported that it was Kane and that rubbed out Bogosian in practice, and that injured his ankle to the point of him being out 4 to 6 weeks. A guy who continually has a problem staying in the lineup. And then the Justin Falk that the Sabres have, not the Justin Falk of Carolina, mouthed off and called Kane selfish, and then Kane had to do a sort of a half-hearted mea culpa with the media. I mean, this is par for the course, isn't it not?
It is, I think, with the idea of how Kane addresses things. Yeah. Look, the issue here is Justin Falk the person who should be calling out other players? I mean, I don't know. Right. So
no. And let me just say this: the person who should be calling him out is somebody who is purported to be a leader on the team, which would be maybe somebody like Jack Eichel or Ristolainen. But the problem is that Kane is an older player who I think is sort of a quasi leader on this team, and he's friends with Jack Eichel. So Jack Eichel is not going to undercut his friend.
Yeah, but there's a way to do that. You don't call him out. You talk to him aside, and that's what the best leaders do. I mean, just to go back, because one of, two of Evander Kane's, best friends in the world, Blake Wheeler and Dustin Byfuglien, one of the things that happened after Andrew Ladd left is Ladd and Buff are very close friends. And one of the former Winnipeg TSN host, Gary Lawless, used to have this theory that maybe it was Ladd who was the guy who could get in with Buff and make Buff tick and get through to him. Okay. Seems that Wheeler's figured that out now. But there needs to be someone to get through to Kane. And maybe Eichel is that guy and he's got to do it. But that, again, that's putting a lot of pressure on a young guy.
Yeah,
it is.
To take that on. And we can look at, and this goes into another argument too. Like, you need guys who, you could be the biggest plumber in the world. You could put me in an NHL locker room, but just because of life experience, I've got something Evander Kane doesn't have. And it doesn't matter whether I can skate worth crap or not. I just know things about life because I've lived it longer. I've seen different things and I've experienced more, and experience has a value. Doesn't mean I could get through to them, but it means I'd probably have the ability to talk to him where I wouldn't be intimidated, right? Like, and there's value to that. Unfortunately, it comes with a position and a cap cost that people don't like to sacrifice in the way the NHL is. But if you're going to have an Evander Kane on your team, and he's not the only guy to be like this, he's just the most public about it, and he's the one who keeps doing it over and over again. You need a soothsayer. You need a Kane whisperer.
Well, I mean, the problem here is, and it's not a big secret that I think that the Sabres are trying to trade Evander Kane. I think they're trying to get as much as they possibly can for him before the February 26th trade deadline. And, does this incident affect the amount of value that Jason Botterill can get back in a deal for him? Because, I mean, if it's a rental situation, and he's a pending UFA, and a team needs scoring, then I don't think it scares people away. But if it's a team that had the eye of maybe signing him and extending him, I don't know. I mean, I
don't think any team has that eye. I think they're just going to use him as a rental.
Yeah.
And I think based on the Carolina-Washington game yesterday, Washington's the team that could use him as a rental. Because
you know who else could?
Los Angeles.
LA.
Oh, sure.
LA.
But Washington's got more assets than LA at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
LA's running out of assets where Washington, like watching that game against Carolina, and again, Dundon probably got real excited because the Caps had a 10-game home streak going, right? Mm-hmm. And Carolina just really suffocated the Caps offense to the point where Ovechkin had a couple of good shots. Oshie was pretty much covered. And I get Burakovsky was out with an illness, but after that, they had no offense. Yeah. Like, there was nobody that you worried about, maybe other than John Carlson, who on that offense, when he plays offense, I should say, that was a worry. Like, it was just the Caps, they could be a very easy team to play against. Tom Wilson aside, they're not that hard to play against. They're not that greasy. They're not that in your face. And Kane would give them a greasiness and some size that might jar some pucks loose.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead. I was going to say, who else might be an interesting team for Kane? Is Carolina.
Yeah, it could be.
Just look at Carolina. I know they want centers. Like, I know they've got they need centers, but they've got assets.
Right.
And you're not going to give up a prime D player for him because he's a rental. Mm-hmm. But if you looked at cities, if you had to say, where's the likelihood of him wanting to go if things worked well, LA's at the top.
Sure.
But they're not going to get anything. But Kane loved Atlanta. He absolutely loved that city. And now, look, Raleigh's not North Carolina, not Atlanta, but it's not far off from being a kind of place that he might really jibe on.
Well, I'll give you another scenario, another team that might have interest in him, even though I think their focus will be on acquiring a goaltender and acquiring defensive help because they've had a couple injuries on the blue line, and that's the New York Islanders. Because the Islanders have a ton of young assets, especially forwards. And, there's some stuff that came out yesterday about Josh Ho-Sang being down in the AHL and his coach calling him a baby. Maybe potentially they're ready to move on from him or Michael Del Cole. But I know that Del
Cole, I think, is playing tonight.
Right. I know he was an emergency call-up, but I'm just saying it could be a showcase for us. I mean,
Andrew Ladd is walking into the office and saying no.
Yeah, but it's a rental situation.
No, here's the thing about all right. Just because you brought it up, the thing about Ho-Sang is I don't know if anybody wants him because if they keep hearing all of these issues where he's really never proved it at the NHL level, it's going to be very hard to get any value for Josh Ho-Sang.
Yeah.
Ho-Sang is going to be on Canada's Olympic team in 2022. You heard it here first. That's where his career. That's where his career is going if he doesn't figure out some things between his ears.
You mean you're talking about if the NHL doesn't go to China? You're talking about he's going to be on the Olympic team.
Yeah,
minus NHL. Okay,
because he's not. Yeah, because he won't be in the NHL.
Right, he'll be playing for SC Bern or something like that. Yeah, that's a good segue, Peter. Because
I agree with you, Russ. If he doesn't straighten some things out, he's just not going to be given any more chances.
The funny thing is, he's going down the road of what Anthony Duclair had gone down in Arizona, but at least Anthony Duclair had a good season that people could say that could whet people's appetites to say, okay, we'll give him a second chance. Ho-Sang had some moments last year, but really, I mean, it may not be worth the bother with all the problems that have popped up. Even going back to his draft year, drove his stock down in the draft, and it's just been. He gets sent back to junior in his first day of training camp. I mean, these things, they affect the value, and that's why I was saying with the Sabres and Evander Kane, these little things that happen, outside the arena or in practice. I mean, they can affect the value of what a team wants.
Absolutely. I mean, remember, Ho-Sang had to run the steps, and then they sent him back to the minors a couple of years ago, and then we thought, okay, he's sort of getting past it. And now he gets healthy scratched and his coach calls him out. Yeah. Like, these are things where, if I'm another team, what am I really giving you asset-wise, knowing that I now have to sort of turn this guy around? He has all the talent, but, there's a lot of guys that had all the talent and still couldn't turn it around.
Well, let's segue to the announcement. Now, Team USA was announced. Most of them were announced on New Year's Day at the Winter Classic that you were at, Russ. And Team Canada announced. And I have to say, Team Canada, 45 minutes of thank yous. 45 minutes of thank yous. And please just give us the roster. They released the roster while the thank yous were going on. If you go ahead, Peter. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say there is an underswelling of discontent with Hockey Canada brewing in Canada right now for a whole host of reasons. And when you see stuff like that and all this stuff, it really makes people question about what this sort of country's, the blood in the veins of this country is doing when you see that kind of stuff at the beginning. Give us a team. Let's get on with it. Guys didn't even know when they were getting phone calls after in Europe after they found out. Like Quentin Hound didn't know until he got texts from his friends. Like, come on, guys. But the thank yous, that's important. Like, I mean, Hockey Canada is a rudderless ship, like in terms of where it's going and its presentation and stuff. It's lost what its focus is. And that's a really prime example of what's going on in Canada with it.
Now we knew that these lineups were going to be going to be nowhere close to what it would be if the NHL was in there. And if you look at Team Canada's forwards, I looked at every single one of them played games in the NHL, from Rene Bourque to Maxim Lapierre, even to Brandon Kozin, Chris Kelly, Derek Roy, Lyndon Vey, Wojtek Volsky, Christian Thomas. I mean, every single one of them played at some point in the NHL, and I believe with the defense. The only one I don't believe played in the NHL is Che Genoway, who I've never heard of.
Genoway, he didn't. I know who he was.
Yeah, okay. And then Matt Robinson, Carl Stollery played with Colorado, I believe. Chris Lee, former Ottawa Senator. Marc-Andre Gragnani, former Sabre. Cody Goluboff. But this is, Russ, this is better in terms of players that were at least on the NHL radar at some time than Team USA. The collection, this is the problem that I had.
The collection of Team USA is bad.
Bad. First of all, we were told there were some indications when Russ and I were at the World Junior that they had only released one goaltender, and that more than likely one of the two main goalies for Team USA at the World Junior was going to be included in the 3 goalies that Team USA had. It came out yesterday. The second and third goaltender is David Leggio, who used to play for the Rochester Amherst. He's a Western New York native, which is great, and a guy named Maxwell, who I've never heard of before. And I usually know players even if they're
he's like 33 years old. Like
I mean the collection of players. I mean, the one thing that I like for Team USA is young players: Will Borgen, Donato, Troy Terry, Greenway, great, but the rest of them, Bobby Sanguinetti, James Wisniewski, Noah Welch. I mean, I don't think they did this on purpose, but I think that the teams that Canada and the teams that the U.S. are sending there, I mean, it's going to make the IOC really hungry to make concessions in 4 years to get the NHL back.
I mean, and I'm sure Gary Bettman's sitting there when he saw both rosters and is very happy about that. I actually kind of like the Canadian team. I think they've done an interesting,
like a Bad News Bears kind of way. Like
they've done an interesting curatorial job of trying to find a mix of experience, know-how, and skill, and hope that they can catch lightning in a bottle.
Right.
So you'd rather have that than a few more players like Cale Makar? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Don't even get me started about the controversy about that and what people like the nonsense I saw on Twitter about journalists telling a kid how to manage his hockey career. Please. Come on.
We don't know if even UMass cleared him. We just know that
exactly.
Or if Colorado has his draft rights, he's a Colorado prospect. They may have said, "We don't want you to go. You played at the World Junior. You were seventh defenseman there. Why go there? And are you going to play behind a 36-year-old Chris Lee?"
Yeah,
I mean that's the thing. It's like, I mean, if he's going to go there and have a role, then great. If he's going to go there,
if you're a 1-2 guy, and they're begging on your hands and knees, then you know what, Tom Rennie needs to be going down to Joe Sakic's office and saying, Joe, that's what happens. It's not about, shaming the kid after he politely declines. I mean, come on.
No, here's my thing. My biggest issue was, and at least the U.S. does have 4 young players, right? And I think Ryan Donato's a really nice player. I think Jordan Greenway is an okay player. But they didn't bring along anybody with any dynamic offensive ability at all, like a Casey Middlestat, like a Brady Tkachuk.
Right.
And I get it. They're young guys, but you know something? When you look at today's athletes, sometimes you could put them out there and there's not going to be an issue at all. If there's two guys that I would think that can do that, would be Tkachuk and Middlestat. I would just like to have heard that, hey, we tried to get him and we couldn't, then I'd get off it, right? I would leave him alone.
I'm not going to put any of these players down. Your country asked you to play. You've played hockey, either in the NHL or the AHL or the ECHL or in Europe. And if your country calls and this is something, it's going to be a highlight for most of their careers. And that's a great thing. So I think that's fantastic. But from the fan perspective, from the hockey viewer perspective, I look at this upcoming tournament and I see, Stefan Elliott and Marc-Andre Grignani, and I'm sorry, it may not be worth it for me to stay up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I'll give it a shot, but I really, it's like these countries did not bring their best talent. And that's where I have the problem. If you're Team USA and it's 1980, you're bringing the best college players, Mark Johnson, McClanahan, Ken Morrow.
Mike, that's 38 years ago.
I know, but
the difference is the college hockey business now is a business.
Yeah,
it's no longer just an afterthought in the NCAA's plethora of sports.
Yeah,
Here's a funny thing, though. All right, so let's go back to Max Lapierre, right, who I don't look at as an Olympian. His only international experience that I could find on his long resume is the Spengler Cup.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you 2 preliminary games before he's suspended for the tournament for low bridging somebody because he did that.
Right. And here's the other thing. The other thing is the U.S. could have brought one young goalie. Because if nothing else, bring him along for the next Olympics if they're not going to go NHL again.
As experience, yeah.
As experience, that would certainly be a good thing. Again, like Jordan Greenway is a nice player, right? But he's a crease guy. If he's not scoring in the crease, there's nothing else he's going to do. At least Ryan Donato is a guy who can score from a lot of different areas, but he is a smaller guy. I just, again, there's dynamic names that you're not putting into this that I don't understand why.
I don't see where USA scores more than a goal or two a game per.
No, they might because the other teams could be just as bad, But I was reminded this morning that, hey, like in 88, 89, not all the rosters were great guys. And it's true, even in 80, not all of them were straight out of college, which they weren't. But I just feel like the talent level here is very low.
But you know what? Go back and look at the last. In my blog yesterday, talking about the Olympics and stuff, I put the last non-NHL Team Canada roster in it.
94
in Lillehammer. So on that team, Paul
was that the Peter Nedved year?
Yes, Nedved, who had defected. Right? Nedved, Paul Correa.
Yep.
Well, there's actually a couple interesting names on there. And to Russ's point, it'd be very interesting to go and look at what's changed as to why we had access to those guys and why we don't now. And I think that's an interesting story. And hopefully someone who's got some access to some of these universities can get in and maybe start getting into that stuff, because it would be fantastic to find out why. What changed over that period of time, right?
The only thing I can tell you from the USA perspective is it seems like they're going with a team that are smart players.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of grit. There's a certain amount of size.
Right.
And they're hoping that that's going to, hold back like the unified team, which is going to be hard to hold back. And I have not even seen the Swedish or Finnish rosters, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be better than the U.S. Canada's roster is okay. But again, Derek Roy and Chris Kelly, those guys might not even make the series. They get banged up so much. Like, you just don't know.
But they've been playing. I mean, Derek Roy can make plays. I mean, that's all you need is one guy who can do something. And and also, I mean, you got to look at when faced with adversity, who's ready to deal with pressure? Forget the physical limitations of it. They're playing hockey, whether they're young, spring chickens or
38-year-old Brian Gianta.
Yeah. Like, you need someone who can do something. And we know the games will not be as fast as they have been in the past. There'll be no Ilya Brzgalov standing there going, they came out like gorillas out of a cage, right?
Well, that'll actually be the interesting look in for me, Peter, is to watch the first couple games and to see the contrast between the NHL and these games. And that's where I think after a while I'll tune out, because if this is Spengler Cup quality,
well, that's the whole thing. Like Peter, are you excited to see Ben Scrivens or Kevin Poulin? Like, come on.
I'm not unexcited. I'm just curious.
You might be unexcited if all of a sudden they give up 2 or 3 quick goals in a game and you're like, oh my God.
Here's why, Mike, and here's what I'll give you a point to this. You know why I don't watch the Spengler Cup? It's got nothing to do with the actual quality of hockey. It's got everything to do with the rink, the jerseys. I can't distinguish what I'm watching because those things are littered with marketing crap.
Yeah,
it's like I can't see a number.
It's like watching the Champions League. Yeah,
exactly. So like this, it'll be clean. You won't have stuff on the boards. You'll be able to see numbers. You'll be able to you'll at least understand what you're watching.
So Peter, you're acting like an 85-year-old guy from Dubuque that just wants to hear the story about Wojtek Wolski coming back from his broken neck, or David Leggio working his way back into
about the Olympics too. I mean, yes, these guys are pros. They played pro hockey.
All right, let me ask you this. So let's say you look at the U.S. roster, right?
Yeah.
Is there anybody on that U.S. roster that you would put on the same level as Hillary Knight as an athlete? Like quality of being an athlete. Like to me, I'm watching the women way before I'm watching the guys because the quality of athletes is so much higher.
Yeah, and the fact that I mean, who doesn't want to watch a Canada USA women's hockey?
Right.
I'll watch that before I watch NHL.
That's my point. These teams have been working towards that, right?
That's honestly, Peter, and I've never been the biggest fan of the quality of women's hockey other than the Canada-U.S. matchup. That's the highlight of the Olympics for me right now is Canada versus U.S. in the gold medal game, because I think that it'll be a competitive contest, and there's hatred there. There's national pride.
But what I'm saying is, let's say you're watching NBC and they're doing a feature, Mike, right? And they're doing a feature on, let's say, a figure skater who's been training for 4 years for this. And let's say Wojtek Wolski, who last year had a broken neck, he hasn't been training 4 years for this. They just threw him on a team. To me, but that's a whole different level of athlete.
It is different. But you know what? NHL players don't train for 4 years to do it.
No, but they don't have to because they're playing in the best league already.
Yeah. And I understand that. But, look, it is what it is. So, us worrying about the quality, we know it's not going to be the same. But what I also don't like about Olympic hockey, just like I don't like the World Juniors, is that you take the best of the best and then you make it into some goofy format that doesn't represent the real intricacy of the sport. And the coaching is give them a 3-game series to decide a medal, because that's when it really the coaching and the teams figure out, because you start being able to adjust for things. You start being able to make adjustments.
I don't think you could do it with the World Juniors because it's too long, but for this you could.
Well, one thing that we could hopefully be happy and look forward to is that when the Canadians score a goal, we won't have to hear, "Hey, baby, would you be my girl?" Okay, couple news items here. The mayor of the city of Ottawa, Jim Watson, yesterday said that the local government will not help subsidize a new downtown arena in. Yep. So now the threat that was the volley that was thrown by Eugene Melnyk at the outdoor game between them and the Montreal Canadiens, where he would consider potentially moving the franchise. Now that sort of comes to the forefront. I don't think it's realistic, but now the ball's sort of in Melnyk's court, because they're supposedly not going to contribute anything like Edmonton did to their building, and that Calgary is looking to do with their new building. But I don't know, Peter, that franchise is in such disarray right now, and Melnyk, I think, is just exacerbating the situation too.
Yeah, it's civic funding in Canada for any kind of major project like that's going to be a sensitive issue right now. And it is in a lot of cities. But Melnick's approach to things is he's actually making Daryl Cates look competent. Like that's the level he's going to right now. And I mean, if you're Ken King and Murray Edwards in Calgary, you're going, oh, keep going, Eugene. You're making us look like angels. Like it's crazy. And you know what? And what's his face? The mayor in Calgary, his name escapes me right now. Nenshi. He's sitting here going, he's probably rubbing his hands together. Okay, like Ken and Murray, come back to the page. Look, they're not getting a plug sent in Ottawa, and I'm willing to work with you guys. Like, well, I mean, good for the municipality for standing up, because
but this sounds like political posturing, doesn't it?
It is posturing. Yeah. They also know that Melnick's in a bind too.
Right.
He's got no loyalty to anyone. He's, and we're only hearing the polite stuff.
Right.
Right.
I'm waiting for Eugene Melnick to be spotted at a Quebec Remparts game.
Yeah.
Because that's honestly, that's the next move. Just like Cates was at the Seattle Seahawks game, and that got things moving in Edmonton. I know that's it's an old analogy, but it did get things moving in Edmonton. And I'm telling you right now, if all of a sudden Eugene Melnick shows up in Quebec City at that brand new building, all of a sudden people's sphincters in Ottawa are going to pucker up.
Yeah. You know what? I don't understand why, other than Ottawa fans who don't deserve to deal with what he's selling in terms as an owner. But the best thing for Eugene Melnick would to be not to own a hockey team. He's not. It's a mess for him.
But he loves owning it, so it doesn't matter.
He loves owning it. He wants to leave it to his kids and grandkids. So I don't know whether, unless Bettman engineers a way for him to make massive money selling that team. And I don't know, a team in Ottawa with a fan base that doesn't show up when the team gets to game 7 of a conference final. That's not exactly, I understand his complaints about his own fan base, and that he's not doing himself any favors by alienating himself against his fan base, but I can understand why he's complaining about them sometimes.
Yeah. But to Russ's point, going back to where we started with the Buzzcast, Melnick's been in and out of building a team for so long. It's the same thing. You don't it's Chicken Little all over again. It's just like Carolina. They were in, they were out. How do you and this is Canadian fans. They're going to pick up on the in and out even faster.
Sure.
Well, two brief things about the Senators, and then one thing about Vegas, and then we'll end the show. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple days regarding Dion Phaneuf and potentially him being traded. Now we know Phaneuf I believe he's got 3 more years at $7 million. I think he contributed to the downfall of this team by not waiving the no move clause, because I don't think Vegas would have claimed him, which basically allowed Mark Methot to go to Vegas and then eventually to Dallas. And I think that's had a detrimental effect on the Senators this year, because Methot was the defensive partner for Erik Karlsson. So it would make sense to move Phaneuf right now, I believe at 32 years old, but I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to trade for him at a $7 million hit unless they're giving back a player of significant money back in that deal. Do you think that there are teams out there that would take Phaneuf at $7 million, Peter?
No, I just don't.
Zero.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I don't think there's any chance that Ottawa would retain salary, but I think that they would take a player back because a player is an asset, especially if it's somebody younger. But unless there's a team desperate for blue line help, and that's why I threw out Tampa, although I don't think they're going to make that move. I don't see them being able to move that contract.
The only team I could see needing it is. Not needing it, but willing to make a deal for it, is the Coyotes. And it's not that they need them. It's just that they could maybe sell back something a little cheaper that they don't need and help and get another pick in the whole thing, which doesn't really help Ottawa anymore because they need to get.
The Coyotes already have Yarmulson they're going to have to unload.
Yeah,
They're not gonna do
and possibly Ekman Larson because he's 1 year away from being unrestricted. And I know that some people thought that the Richard Panik deal that they just made was basically to get to the cap floor next year because it was $2.8 million and it wasn't a long-term thing, and that's probably why they did it. But I question what Chaika is doing. The other name that's out there and that's being bandied about regarding the Senators is Mike Hoffman, and I saw him play on Wednesday. Mike Hoffman's a good scorer, and he's
a good scorer, man.
And this is where Ottawa is. The reason that they're going to trade Mike Hoffman is not because of his ability. It's because they backloaded the contract. It was, I believe, a 5-year deal. It was the first couple years were under $4 million, and now it balloons to over 5 or close to 6. Right. And they don't want to pay that. So a team that's willing to pay that and is looking for goal scoring is going to be, I've heard St. Louis is one possibility, but that's a player that's a difference maker if you get him, if it's a team who's going to.
Now he is way off the pace of 2 years ago, though.
Yes,
but
he's still a good player. And
he is. Yeah. He is.
And he's going to be a great pickup for someone if they can manage the liability going forward.
Now, Russ, we heard this during the summer when the name of the Vegas Golden Knights was still in dispute, and it comes out yesterday that the U.S. Army has filed a trademark claim against the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, but they lost it already.
Well, I don't know if they lost it, but all I know is that
I thought they did.
I didn't hear any. I would be surprised if it would be adjudicated in 24 hours. I saw
that the judge denied it because he basically said, if I could be wrong, but I thought I saw the judge denied it because he basically said this has been going on for a year and there's been no confusion. And I did retweet. I said it's not like the Vegas Golden Knights ever said be all you can be to sell tickets either.
Well, Vegas released a statement. And it says, we are not aware of any single complaint from anyone attending our games that they were expecting to see a parachute team and not a professional hockey game.
Right.
So they're throwing shade at the Army. The Army's going to invade their ass.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. Good show, guys. We will be back on Monday with a new lineup. I don't know who, but we'll let you know before the show. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.